Hello. The first thing you might be wondering is if this is an After Effects class, why are we starting with Adobe Animate? Well, I have a few different reasons. The first is it's a better way, or I think a more direct way, to illustrate how animation works and how, kind of the most fundamental of animation principles, timing and spacing, works. The second thing is if we look at the difference between software that focuses on frame by frame animation, you'll kind of hopefully understand like what After Effects does. And I'll just leave it at that for now. The third reason is After Effects is a hub. So you can certainly make things right within After Effects, but another useful thing that it does is it can bring in animation and static files and audio and video and lots of stuff from other software, so it can act as a hub to bring things together. And this is especially true when you're using other Adobe software in the Creative Cloud, which have been developed to have tools that kind of handshake with each other, that integrate and export and kind of update each other. So let's just get started here. So here, you're opening Adobe Animate for the first time. You have a menu, something like this. We're going to go to New File. And so what we're looking for is, for this very first exercise here, 960 by 540. So that is the same aspect ratio as an HD frame, which is similar to your laptop, an HD TV. That's a 16 by 9 rectangle. But we're making it half the resolution, so half the width and height, which is actually a quarter of the number of pixels, but we're not going to worry about that for now. And we're going to set the frame rate to 24. And I'll talk about frame rate in a sec. And everything else I think is fine, so I'll just hit create. Okay, so let's talk about frame rate for a second. So I have a little example here that I will bring in. And here we see, the circle kind of oscillating back and forth. The one on the left is the smoothest, and that's at 24 frames per second. The one in the middle is 12 frames per second. You can see it's a little bit more steppy, a little bit more stylized. You could describe that as being animated on twos, which is like half as many frames as the 24. And then the one on the right is 8 frames per second. So that could be considered animated on threes, and it's more steppy or more smooth. The more frames per second you have, the smoother the animation becomes. But there are certain kind of qualities to just how many frames per second the image has. The other thing that's kind of good to note here is the animation itself, that is the timing and spacing, is exactly the same in all three instances. The only difference is the amount of images we see per second of time. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is change our workspace to basic, and we'll reset basic to its original layout so we can kind of each see the same thing. Okay, and then I'm going to, instead of having assets open, I'm going to click over to properties. And this shows us the same settings we use to set up our document here. So I'm going to take this color here and just bring the brightness down a little so it's not quite so intense. Then I'm going to select classic brush and just do a little test, and we're ready to go. Okay, so I have an empty keyframe here, and what I'm going to do is just draw a series of circles. And then what I want to do is draw new circles on frames, and we're going to create movement, right? So add a blank keyframe here. Now I can't see what was on the previous frame, and so not having a point of reference makes this really difficult to do. So most animation software will have a feature called onion skinning. I can turn that on there. And how Animate does it is previous frames are blue and subsequent frames are green. All right, add another one. Okay, I'll turn off onion skinning and we'll see what we got. So pretty boring. So the first thing I want to show you is timing. So the idea behind timing is if there's more time between frames, your movement will slow down. So let's say starting at frame 3, we'll add a frame. So now if the duration of frame 3 is 2 frames, we'll do the same thing with frame 4. And then frame 5, we'll add 2. And then 3. 1, 2, 3. And then 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then the end. And so now it's going to slow down to a stop. So it's pretty steppy and stroby, but it does work, right? We are slowing down the movement by manipulating the timing. Okay, so let's try something else. So I'm going to select all these and delete them. And once again, we'll insert a blank key in the beginning. So in this one, we're going to play with spacing, so changing the space between the drawings. And so what can be really useful is just kind of planning out what it is you want to do. So what I could do here is I could add a line. This is my path. I'll add a little more to it. And then I can say, like, that's the beginning, and that's the end. And then I can kind of plan out my movements here. So it can start with small, get a little bigger, and a little bigger still, bigger. Goes really fast, and then starts to slow down again. And I could even name these 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 9, 10, etc. Okay. So what I will do is this will be my reference, and I'll add. We'll make the duration. We'll add some time to this. Then we'll add a new layer, and this will be for my animation. I can even lock that one, and on this layer, select those. Okay. So we'll turn onion skinning back on, and here we go. Oh, whoops, doing it all in one frame. So that's frame 1, 2. And another thing we can do is as our object starts to accelerate, we can kind of elongate it and give a sense of movement, of motion blur, even with this really kind of terrible drawing. Okay, so I'm going to make this a little shorter. And I'll turn it off. Turn off onion skinning. All right, let's see what we get. All right, so that is, controlling the speed of our object through spacing and then having a bit of a guide. So what I'd like you to do for homework is an exercise called Magic Dot. So I'm just going to get rid of all this, get rid of that, and we'll make our brush. I don't know, like 8. There we go. All right, undo that. And so what you can do is this here. What you can do is play with, turn on, you're just getting on timing and spacing just with this little dot here. So I can play with accelerating. And decelerating. We got. And I can play with as it gets faster. Starting, whoopsie. Too many things to one line there. Let's just see what we got. I can play with streaks. And so I can play with paths, I can play with streaks. We can have the streaks be design elements. So this is a really great exercise. Give you a sense of arcs and timing and spacing and just like how much interest can we bring to this little dot. Okay, so much fun. Okay, so that's one thing to do. Don't spend too long on it. I'd rather you make a few iterations than get too in the weeds on any one thing. The next thing I'd like you to try is just save this. And while we're at it, I think it's always a good idea to name a file after what it is, to give it a version number, and to put your initials at the end. I think that's a good naming convention. So we'll make a new scene here. The other thing I'd like, so all of these will be 960 by 540. The next thing I'd like for you to play with is near, having things get bigger as they come close to you. Play with space through scale. That's another really good exercise after you do your magic dot. All right, and then the last one is just to experiment. But I would say keep everything 960 by 540 and black and white. One other thing we need to do is export these things. So we'll do export animated GIF for now. And you can hit play to see. We're going to turn off transparency. And let's see what it looks like. I should probably have made this looping, so have it start where it ends, but whatever. And we'll just save it. Okay,